Last episode, the MR2 got stuck behind the barn due to a failed clutch pedal. Since then, I managed to get it back on the road here. Just took a bit of work, but now the car feels great to drive. Mechanically, the car is great now. I mean, even cosmetically, the body is in pretty good shape. I just have to clean up the interior a bit and find a new steering wheel. Okay, for real now, this clearly isn't my car. There's a bit of a story as to what's going on here. Since last episode, I have indeed gotten my car unstuck, but I'll get back to that next episode because something pretty big has happened just now, and I'm gonna use this video to focus on this blue MR2 here. If you remember last episode, my dad took my car to the shop for me to get the exhaust installed. Well, it turns out he enjoyed driving the car so much he actually bought his own and surprised me with it. I came to our garage as I usually do, and he told me to go take a look at the Fiat 500 and tell him what was wrong with it. At this point, I was sweating bullets. I had moved the Fiat when I had to get to the MR2 to get it out when I took it home, and I was thinking I had dented it or something. Well, parked behind the Fiat was this 1985 MR2. My dad seriously one-upped me by buying a nicer version of my own car. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's got shiny paint, no dents, and runs great. And on top of that, it came with an entire extra car worth of spare parts. I'm not kidding, there is a ton of stuff which I'll go through in a bit. So how much did he pay for it? Well, this is a bit of a shocker, but it was listed for $2,900. Conveniently, $100 less than what I paid for my car. I'm mildly jealous. There's no denying this is a much better buy than my MR2, but I am still happy with mine, as I specifically did want a red Mark 1B because I like the look of the later MR2s versus the early Mark 1A. But I mean, there's no denying getting essentially two cars is better than one. This is honestly pretty typical of my dad. He always finds the craziest deals. I mean, he has all these cars, and most people may think he just dumps money into buying whatever he wants, but that's not really true. My dad knows a good deal when he sees it, and will not buy a car if it's even like a fair price. He just sits patiently and checks listings every day until that one insanely priced car pops up and he jumps into action. Usually it's a great car that's just priced low to sell fast, or a cheap car that has a small problem that the owner doesn't know how to fix. Like, he bought our RX-7 for dirt cheap because it wouldn't start. My dad towed it home, and the only thing that was wrong with it was the battery was installed backwards. It pays to know your stuff. But enough about my dad and his car buying skills, and enough about this MR2. As far as the series is concerned, it doesn't really mean much more than just being a reference to what the car is supposed to be like, that and making me jealous. What actually matters to me is the fact that my dad is very generously giving me the boatloads of spare parts he got free with the car. There are spares of everything from an almost entire body panel set, including doors and bumpers, every single interior trim piece, seats, a radiator, a whole dash, and even some other pretty big things. The only things I don't see are basically brakes and suspension parts, but honestly, there's a chance there's another box I just haven't seen yet. The only real problem with all this stuff is it is from a 1985 Mark 1A, while my car is a 1989 Mark 1B. So some parts are not compatible, such as some of the body panels, but most of this stuff is usable for me. So yeah, as you can see, there is a lot of stuff here, like an insane amount of just stuff. I mean, this is basically Christmas for any car guy. Realistically, I don't need all of this stuff. I mean, I want to keep it all just to have on hand, but my dad also made a deal where I can sell whatever I don't need and split the money with him 50-50. So I just want to go through everything we have here and talk about what I can use and what I want to sell. Selling car parts can be a slow process, as some of this stuff is very specific and not always in high demand, but regardless, I'm hoping the parts I do sell can be used to fund the MR2 project further. I can start saving for bodywork, paint, or maybe even suspension stuff. First off, you can see we got one of every body panel, all color matched with the car. The only panels missing are the hood and the rear quarter panels and roof, since those are welded on the car. Honestly, I really wish these were compatible with my car, but early MR2s have a bit different of a body style. If I could, I would just start sanding these down and repaint them red, then I could just replace my panels as I go, but oh well. I do think the trunk and engine lid may be the same though. I haven't checked yet. Maybe one could be used as a test panel just to practice painting or something. The front bumper also has fog lights and the slightly rarer clear turn signals. Plus we got spare headlights, so worth keeping if my motors go out. More cosmetic stuff, we have an entire set of interior trim plastics, and it's all in great condition. Some of this stuff is not compatible with my car, but I think the parts I actually need are, like the dash trim and the rear compartment. Both of mine are cracked. These are all worth a good amount, so I hope I can find someone to buy the ones that I don't need. I'm also pretty excited because I wanted a spare gauge cluster. Now, I do prefer the look of mine to the earlier version, but what I really want to do is take it apart and make a custom gauge face for it since mine is faded. It may end up being too hard, but now I can give it a try on this one just as a little test piece. The car even came with a full set of carpets. Now, these aren't perfect, but I can use them to outline and trace my new ones that I want to make. Even crazier is there's even a spare headliner, the back window, and the rear side windows too, plus all the weather sealing strips for the entire car. There are even perfectly clean seats too. I mean, these and the body panels may be a bit hard to sell because I can't really ship them on eBay. Someone would have to come pick them up, but hopefully I can find a place for them. Ironically, the main things the blue MR2 does need is a new steering wheel and stereo, and the parts car came with neither. There are also a bunch of just random things here too. Most of this stuff I don't need. We got a wire harness, 2 engine cooling fans, a few starters, a cat, and 2 of the 4 engine mounts. A couple noteworthy things are this ECU. These are worth a good amount, I'm pretty sure. And it's funny, we have a couple spare muffler hangers because I literally had to buy 2 of these for 50 bucks a few weeks ago. There's even a whole exhaust pipe. It appears to be another MR2 AW11 though, so thankfully I didn't just waste all my money on mine. We also have a spare radiator, which I don't really need right now, but it would be nice to clean up and restore and then swap into mine. Then I can sell mine later. Of course, we got a ton of just random stuff as well. Loads of bolts, fuses, fuel injectors, and old spark plugs and wires. We also have a box of engine parts like an intake, alternator, distributor, TVIS, and that spider bracket. Honestly, there may be more interesting stuff laying around that I just haven't found yet too. Also, now we have the 2 big things that I want to talk about. First, we have a spare transmission. Now, my MR2 doesn't need a transmission rebuild. It seems to be fine right now, but I would want to do a rebuild eventually. I considered keeping this one to rebuild, but it is actually the older C50 transmission, which has notorious 5th gear pop-out issues. Later MR2s came with a C52 one, which is stronger, like mine. So I will part this one out or just sell the whole thing. You can tell the difference because the C50 has a single starter hump, while the C52 has a second one on the opposite side as well. And now, the big reveal. You probably know where this is going, but the car came with a spare engine, a 4AGE, supposedly from another MR2. Just a couple episodes ago, I mentioned I wanted to get a spare engine to rebuild on the side as I drive and work on my MR2. That way I don't have to garage the car for a long time while the engine is out. I can instead just rebuild this one and then swap it in nice and quickly when I'm done. Like, this is literally perfect timing. If we take a closer look at it, I'm not an expert, but conveniently the engine appears to be a 7-rib one. You can count the ribs there. This is the later version from the MK1B. It's stronger than the early MK1 A1, which only has 3 ribs. This is what my car has right now, so it's perfect. Now, the 7-rib one is designed stronger because it's meant to take boost from the supercharger, but you could also do a turbo with it. Now, with how the timing worked out, I don't plan on boosting the engine now, but I'm glad it's the 7-rib one just for longevity's sake. The only real disadvantage of this one is the extra strength does add some more weight. The internals are also beefed up, which adds more weight, but some people claim the engine revs slower since it has to spin more weight around. Not really a big concern for me, as I think the pros outweigh the cons, but still worth noting. Now, the engine mostly seems to be all there, but the big problem with it is the fact it is supposedly seized. This means the engine does not spin freely. This can happen from either the engine sitting around too long unused, but it can also mean that the engine was run without oil and everything locked up from damage and heat. Not the end of the world, but freeing the pistons is definitely an extra step to take apart the engine, and the odds of damaged parts is higher. But when doing a full, thorough engine rebuild, you oftentimes have to replace a lot of the parts anyways, so again, not the end of the world. But besides that, I think this will be a good engine to clean up and rebuild. So here I'm kind of at a sudden crossroads now. I want to rebuild the engine, of course, but I'm not entirely sure how to go about it video-wise. Like, this rebuild definitely relates to the MR2 videos, but it honestly could be its own series that runs alongside the MR2 series, because it's separated from the car as is, and even just the idea of rebuilding an engine, or more specifically a 4AGE, is much broader information than just the MR2. Like, it makes more sense for me to separate the two. That way I don't have to have random disjointed clips of me working on the car and then parts of me working on the engine in one video. But even further, I'm not sure whether to make the new 4AGE rebuild series another casual vlog style where I do random stuff as I go, or instead make it a more detailed step-by-step guide. That way, if anyone does a similar rebuild, they can learn the process from start to end. I don't want to make a boring school lecture, so I'd still try to make it entertaining, but it'd overall be more cohesive and logically in order versus how the MR2 series jumps around as I work on each part. Because really, as I've looked into rebuilding the engine, I really have not found any good videos on the process. There are videos of people rebuilding 4AGEs and stuff, but none are particularly well filmed or detailed, so I feel like with this very lucky opportunity, I can make a definitive 4AGE rebuild series that anyone can reference. I mean, I've never done a full rebuild myself, but I know the process and my dad would help out as he's rebuilt many engines before. I mean, most of the work I've done on my MR2 has been my first time too, but I feel like I've gone into everything pretty well researched and prepared. Really, as I've started researching the rebuild process, the main limiting factor for me is going to be money. I mean, pretty typical for this series. I feel like that's basically every episode. An engine rebuild could really be anything from under $1,000 to approaching $2,000, depending how bad the engine is. The only problem is you really don't know until you take it all apart and inspect everything. Then based on that, you gotta buy new parts and possibly have a shop do machine work on the block or head. So that being said, unless you want to be sitting around with an engine disassembled and parts scattered everywhere, it's best to have the worst case funds available so things can be ordered as needed and things can be done in a timely manner. I mean, really, if you have everything you need, this process shouldn't take that long. You can do it in a weekend if you really wanted to. So again, I'm left with another big decision. A rebuild is inevitable with how the car is, but as of now, the MR2 just has higher priority things it needs money for rather than a new engine. But just seeing it here, having a spare engine, I just can't take my mind off rebuilding it. But if I started taking the engine apart now and rebuilding, the process would be very long since, again, I don't want to stop funding the actual car itself, so I think it's best to wait for now. I'd be lying if I said I haven't considered running a Kickstarter or something to raise the funds and start the rebuild series off right and make it the quality guide I want. That would give me the money necessary to do a complete series in a timely manner with no elongated delays or gaps between videos, but I admittedly don't think my channel is big enough to gather that kind of support yet. Maybe I can make enough fundraising from selling off some of these spare parts, but again, I feel like there are other things the MR2 could use with that money first. But anyways, not trying to sound like a greedy YouTuber, just giving honest thoughts as I figure out what I want to do with this already very fortunate event. I make these videos out of pure passion, so the rebuild will come one day no matter what, but I'm just not sure what I want to do quite yet video-wise with it. I mean, heck, if I had an actual big budget, I'd build a set and film the series as this artsy, retro-looking cinematic tutorial. But anyways, there are big things coming. This was definitely a big and unexpected day for me. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any thoughts on the rebuild series or anything. Special thanks, of course, to my patrons as well. Raleigh, Larry, Dylan, Matoush, Eddie, and Jordan, plus donations from Will and Alika. I'll get more in detail to what those are getting me next episode. You're all too generous. Next episode, we will go back in time a bit and be working on the actual car. I just had to share this sudden event with everyone, so see you all next time.